Redemption is good, right?
Amen. Hallelujah.
Restoration is powerful, right? Wouldn't it be awesome if all of creation could experience restoration? Video shows how an individual can be restored to Jesus, and thank God, God restores individuals. Imagine if all of creation could be restored. So that video hints at a story. And behind each person's relation to God, each one of us relates to God in some way or another. You could be an atheist, and you relate to God by not believing in Him, right? You could be various religions, and relate to God in your various religious ways, your various religious rituals. You could be born again by the Spirit of God, and relate to God as a child. But regardless of how you relate to God, whether you believe or reject, there is a story behind that. A much bigger story. I think we could all agree, and I think if you could speak to any person, anywhere on the planet, they would agree that the world is broken. Am I right?
Yes.
And the world is broken because we are broken. Even at our healthiest and our best, we're fallen so far short. And every human being feels the brokenness of the world that we live in. There is a universal dismay with the world as it is. So you say, what if I do have somebody over at my house for Easter dinner? What am I going to talk about? What am I going to invite my neighbor over and talk about? One of the things you can talk about is the state of the world. Everybody agrees. It is not the way it's supposed to be. And the fact that there is a supposed to be inside of our head tells you that there's a God. We all have this memory that we never personally experienced of the way things are supposed to be. We long for the way things are supposed to be. How can that be? How do we have this imprint of what's supposed to be? So the world is dismay, and the dismay is universal. There is a universal longing for something people don't always have a word for, and that word is shalom. Some of you are familiar with the Hebrew word shalom. The Hebrew word we're going to unpack in a few minutes is true peace, not just the absence of conflict, but justice and wholeness and health. We long for shalom. C.S. Lewis said this. He said, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Ladies and gentlemen, there is good news. God is going somewhere with history. God is going somewhere with history. All this trouble and all this pain, it's going somewhere. God is going to wrap up history for His glory, and that is good news. And so we're starting a new series today called the Ark of Redemption. And you saw the graphic up there a minute ago. The Ark of Redemption, it starts with creation, goes to the fall, the redemption of Jesus, and the new creation. Here's the cool thing. See, that there's an end to that ark, and it's the new heaven, the new earth. It's Eden 2.0. And guess where we're at on that ark? We're to the right of redemption. We're on this end of the ark, ladies and gentlemen. Jesus is coming soon. Amen. Jesus is coming soon. So we're doing the Ark of Redemption, and we're going to be we're going to be unpacking the great story of the Bible. There's a great story of the Bible, and we're going to be doing this for 6 weeks, and there should be a handout. Did you guys get a handout on your way in? Yes? And okay, good. So I see your handouts there. That just gives you a little bit about the Ark of Redemption. There's the handout. So we're going to take a minute today, just a few minutes, to look at the idea itself. And then we're going to dive into the first part, which is creation. So we're going to start the Ark of Redemption where God starts it. We're going to start the story where God starts it in the beginning. But before we get there, I just want to talk for just a moment about the Ark of Redemption. Paul, you guys, everybody likes Paul, right? Sometimes we'll be talking about Peter and say, Paul, what do we like Paul so much? Paul spent some time in Acts 17 in Athens. You don't have to turn there yet. Our text today is actually in Genesis chapter 1. But if you want to, you can. In Acts 17, Paul's in Athens, and Athens is very pagan. He doesn't go into a synagogue there. He goes into the Areopagus, which is a philosophy auditorium where they discuss the latest ideas. And so he's in Athens, and he cannot assume Jewish forms of thought. He's in a completely pagan environment. Unfortunately, Paul knows how to navigate in that environment. So he's in a place where they don't believe in the one God, Yahweh. They don't have the Mosaic law. They don't have the history of redemption. He's starting with nothing, or almost nothing, right? So I want to take a look at how he handled, or how he introduced the gospel to the Greeks, the Greek philosophers. Check this out. Acts 17, starting in verse 24. This is Paul's speech at the Areopagus, Mars Hill. He says this: "The God who made the world and all things in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all people life and breath and all things. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation, that they would seek God, if perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he's not far from each one of us. For in him we move and exist, as even some of your poets have said, for we are also his children. Being then the children of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and thought of man. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to men that all people everywhere should repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness through the man he appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead." You see what Paul is doing there. Paul is introducing the gospel to people who have no background. They have no Jewish forms of thought. This is alien to them. He's giving context. Paul is giving context to the gospel by setting the gospel in its bigger story. Look what he says. He says God made the world. This is going to be foreign to the various religious people that are sitting there in the room. But there's a pantheon of gods, and they did various things. He's like the Lord of heaven and earth, the Lord of everything. There's one God, and he made the world. And he made from one man every nation. So he starts with creation. And then he points out human idolatry. See, nowadays we'd be like, oh, that would offend them. We don't want to talk about their sin. But Paul goes right in there, and he talks about how you took your own thoughts and ideas and you fashioned images, and you made your own gods. Which is rebellion, right? And then he says, you got to repent. And then he says, God has fixed the day when he will judge the world by this man, Jesus. The end will come. There will come a consummation of history when all of mankind stands before God, the Creator. So the reason God has the right to judge the world is because he created it. It's his world. Okay? And all you guys here in the Areopagus, no matter what you believe, you're going to stand before the true God and you're going to give an answer when he comes to consummate history. And then finally he points to the resurrection, the proof that this is coming. So in the same way, for us and all people, seeing the big picture, he's helping the Greeks with the big picture. And seeing the big picture, in other words, seeing redemptive history in all of its context, helps us see how we as individuals fit into the big picture. So this isn't a story about you, although you fit into the story. This is a story about God. It's a story about Jesus, the Messiah, the center of history. And seeing the big picture helps us something, in almost any situation, context is a really good thing. So you walk into a conversation at work, and you hear them mentioning your name, and you don't know if it's gossip, if it's good, if it's bad, maybe you won the lotto, you don't know, right? How are you going to know? You got to listen to the context. If somebody says to you, "Are you mad?" the only way you can know what they're saying is, do they mean, "Are you crazy?" Or do they mean, "Are you angry?" The way you're going to know what they're talking about is if you have the bigger context of the conversation. And so, what Paul was doing and what we need to do is set the gospel in its bigger context, the big story of what God is doing in history and doing in creation. It helps us understand how we fit into it, and seeing the big picture helps us understand the greatness of the gospel, the centrality and the greatness of the gospel, and the greatness of the glory of God. But I'm going to bet something else. If I was a betting man, which I'm not, if I was a betting man, I would bet that understanding the great picture of the gospel in its context is motivational. When you understand the grand scope of what you're part of, that motivates you to share it, and that motivates you to live it. If it's just, I don't go to hell when I die, There's more to the story than that. Thank God I'm not going to hell. But there's a bigger story. And when you understand the bigger story, it motivates you. Here's the thing. You've heard me say this before. I learned long ago that every single human being gravitates towards the picture in their head. What's your vision? What's your vision in your head? Is your vision you living in a nice ranch house with a 2.5-car garage and 2.5 kids and 4 Explorer? Is that your vision? If that's your vision, you will kill yourself with that vision. You'll do what it takes to get the nice little wife, and the nice little husband, and nice little kids, and nice little house, and nice little car, and cat and dog. You'll kill yourself with that vision. You will gravitate towards the vision in your head almost unconsciously. If the vision in your head is to be rich and famous, that's what you're going to move towards. If the vision in your head is to vegetate in front of the television, that's precisely what you're going to do without almost any effort. And if the vision in your head is the kingdom come, then you will serve the kingdom. We gravitate towards the vision in our head. And understanding the big picture, the big redemptive history context gives us a vision of something that God is going to do that's bigger than anything we can imagine. And you get that picture in your head, and it will order your life. So when I see Christians wasting their lives, it can only mean one thing. You have no vision. Your picture is your little, tiny life. Let me urge you, Armitage Baptist Church, to have God's vision in your head. So in the same way that Paul began his story with creation, his story, redemptive history, we're gonna begin there as well. If Paul can do it, we can do it too. So turn your Bibles to Genesis chapter 1. We read these verses, we know them, and we take them for granted. Let's try to unpack them today and see what's going on in the great story of redemption. Genesis chapter 1, starting, believe it or not, in verse 1. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the water. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. In the beginning. Don't pass up that phrase too fast when you read your Bible. In the beginning. There was a beginning. There was a beginning. You understand that? In the beginning means that there was a beginning. Okay? Beginning to what? There was a beginning to creation. All that we know, the universe. There was a beginning to the universe. There was a beginning to time and space and matter. Now just let that soak in for a second. There was a beginning to time. There was a beginning to space. There was a beginning to matter. There was a beginning to the physical universe as we know it. Reality as we know it had a start. The great Bible commentator A.W. Pink says this. And by the way, all great Bible commentators have two initials for their first name. C.S. Lewis, N.T. Wright, A.W. Tozer, and S.F. Laughlin. No, I'm kidding. A.W. Pink says this. In the great expanse of eternity, which stretches behind Genesis 1:1, the time before there was time, the universe was unborn, and creation existed only in the mind of the great Creator. So, before creation, before that word beginning, there was nothing but the triune God. No time, no space, no matter, no universe. There was only God. Only God existed. John says this in John chapter 1. He says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning." So Jesus was there at the beginning of creation. He's not created. He was there, and check this out, verse 3. "Through Him, through the Word, through Jesus, all things were made. Without Him, nothing was made that has been made." Without Him, nothing was made that has been made. So everything that has been made, which is everything, has been made through the agency of Jesus Christ. Amen. He's bigger than you think. Tozer says this, and by golly, I forgot the book. But unlike last time when I showed you a book and didn't tell you the title, this time I don't have the book, but I will tell you the title. Imagine a book in my hand. It's A.W. Tozer's book, another initials, right? A.W. Tozer's book, and it's simply entitled Jesus. And the book will blow your mind. It took my little brain and goes, wow, just expanded my brain. He spent the whole book unpacking God the Son. It just came out, Moody Publishers. I got it for free because I oversee the Moody internship. People here, you guys didn't know that, but you got me a free book. For you, it's $18.95 on Amazon, but I would highly recommend it. You can read it devotionally, just read a chapter a day. It will change your life. Here's a great Tozer quote, and I don't have it on the screen, so pay close attention. Listen carefully. Tozer had a way with words. This may hurt some of you, but I'm obliged to tell you that God does not need anything you have. He does not need a dime of your money. It is your own spiritual welfare at stake in such matters as these. There's a beautiful and enriching principle involved in our offering to God what we are, what we have, but none of us are giving because there's a depression in heaven. Long ago, God said, if I had need of anything, would I tell you? If the living God had need of anything, he would no longer be God. So that was before the beginning. He's talking about creation. We are concerned here with that which the Bible calls before the foundation of the world. We are told that in the beginning, God created. We are made to realize that God does not lean upon his own creation. If God needed help or strength, he would not be omnipotent, and he would not then be God. If God needed advice and counsel, he would not be sovereign. If he needed wisdom, he would no longer be omniscient. If he needed support and sustenance, he could not be self-existent. So as far as man is concerned, there was a beginning and there was a creation. That phrase in the beginning does not mark a birth date for God Almighty. It means the point in time as we think of it, when God ceased to be alone and began to make time and space and creatures and beings. We're not quite ready to leave that pre-creation situation before the foundations of the earth were laid, when God dwelt alone, the uncreated being, the Father in love with the Son in love with the Holy Ghost, and the Holy Ghost with the Father and Son. God is the eternal God, dwelling in a tranquility that had no beginning and that can have no ending. God was doing just fine before there was anything. Dwelling in perfect harmony in the Trinity. So we have a perfectly joyful, content, glorious Trinity dwelling as the only reality, the only existence, and he was doing just fine. You know what that means? Before I was here, he was doing fine, and after I'm gone, he's going to be fine too. And that's you too. God wants to use you, but he does not need you. He will get the job done with or without you. But please, God, include me. Please include me. Don't let me sit and watch television the rest of my life. Include me, oh God. And look what God does next. It says in the beginning, and then it says, God created the heavens and the earth. In other words, what it's saying is he created everything. God created everything out of nothing. Now, when I create, I'm not an artist, but if I was, I could say, I created this. But I didn't really create it. I had to take clay or dirt or paint or nails and make something that God already made and create. And in a sense, we do create. Okay? But I'm creating something out of something. God created everything out of nothing. I'm not going to, since I'm fasting YouTube, I'll just tell you about it. There is the great MIT quantum physicist Gerald Schroeder. Write that name down, Gerald Schroeder. YouTube him. He proves the existence of God in 5 minutes. He's an Orthodox Jew. Jewish background, used to be nominal Jew, used to be an atheist. And I'm not buying into all his theology. I just want to recommend the video for one reason. So he used to be an atheist, and then he studied quantum physics and realized that the God of the Bible was real. And he has this cool thing where he shows the expansion of time and space in the universe, and outside of the time-space continuum, there's nothing. And he's like, that's not space. Space is something. He's like, we don't know what that is out there. The universe is expanding into nothing, and we cannot get our heads around nothing. We cannot comprehend nothing. Nothing is not space. Nothing is not darkness. Nothing is nothing. And it was out of nothing that God made stuff, which is pretty cool. We could stop right here and spend the rest of the time worshiping. Out of nothing, God spoke and created. That is true creation. Hebrews 11:3 says this, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. That is the feeble human attempt to communicate that God took nothing and spoke reality. So a great question is why? Why would God create? He was doing fine when there was no such thing as time. Why would he create? There's a hint in Isaiah 43. So Isaiah 43, 6, second half of the verse says this: "Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made." God created people for his glory. The Trinity created mankind for his glory. And the Trinity was in a state of perfect joy, and yet he was pleased, it pleased God to share his joy. So God created simply because it pleased him and it glorified him to do so. It pleased God to create, it glorified God to create, and so he decided to create. And then we go on in this passage and we see how he began to create. It says the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. The Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters, and then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So God began to take the formless and form it. He spoke, and he created light. And in verse 4, he goes on to say that the light was good. And we see in verse 2 that the Spirit of God is present in creation. And we know from John 1 and Colossians 1 and other passages that the second person of the Trinity, Jesus, was the agent through which creation happened. We already read John 1. Check out Colossians chapter 1. It says, "The Son is the image of the invisible God," verse 15, "the firstborn over all creation." That does not mean that Jesus was created. That means that he is, firstborn means preeminent. He has the preeminent position over creation. Verse 16, "For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authority, all spirit beings, all life, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." Uncreated Jesus Christ. So we see that the Father and the Son and the Spirit, the Trinity, created all that there is. The Trinity created. Then for the next 23 verses or so, we see God speaking all the creation into existence, one thing at a time. He's delighting. God is delighting, and the angels are singing as space and time and matter and living things are stretched out in the universe before God. But then God does something really amazing. Chapter 1, verse 26. God does something really amazing. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." So God makes a creature in his image. He makes man. God makes human beings. And that means that God makes a being that, like him, has intellect, will, and emotions. God makes a being, unlike all the animals, a being that can think and choose and feel. And thus, unlike all other creatures, we see in Genesis 2:7 that man has the breath of God in him. He is spiritually alive. He is created for fellowship and intimacy with God. God made man. So here's, I'm going to throw this in for free. If we go late, sue me. I'm going to throw this in for free. We live in a time when people think that by elevating animals, we're doing something good. Now, I love animals. I got way too many of them in my house. And I love them. They sleep with me. I mean, I love animals. I also eat animals. And the reason I eat them is because they're not made in the image of God. And if the pagans are doing it, that's fine. But if Christians think that they're going to elevate animals and make federal laws about them and have animal law and animal lawyers and all these animal rights, there's danger because you don't actually elevate animals. You drag people down. And so when people and animals have the same value, guess what? they get treated the same way. So caution, do not get caught up in secular ideologies that pull mankind down from his special position before God. There is mankind and everything else, and that's how it works. We are made in the image of God. We are humans were made spiritually alive so that we could interact with God. We are self-conscious. We think and feel and choose because God wanted us to interact with Him.
Hallelujah.
We see a couple more things here. He says, and let them rule. Check this out. Because we're made in the image of God, God actually shared His dominion with this being. God shared His dominion with this human. And because man is made in the image of God, that means that man can exercise authority. Your dog cannot exercise authority. A dolphin, they're smart. They got a bigger brain than you do, but they cannot exercise authority. Only humans can exercise authority because we are made in the image of God. All you children, remember that. Mom and Dad exercise authority over you because we're made in the image of God. What gives me the right to exercise authority over my kid? God does. So in verse 26 and in verse 28, we see that God actually makes people rulers over His creation. He hands the rule of creation to these people. In verse 27, He says this, in the image of God, He created a male and female, He created them. So I understand this to mean something profound. My understanding of this verse, and I'm not speaking ex cathedra here, but my understanding is this: the image of God is expressed in its fullness in women and men together. In other words, you have these two genders that complement each other in the image of God and in the rule of the earth. And this is at the heart of God's creation of man. Beware of messing with the issue of gender because it has to do with the way that we reflect the image of God. And then God says, let them rule. Ladies, He didn't say let him rule. Can I get a witness? He said let them rule. Let the man and the woman rule over creation. We share authority over the creation as men and women. Yes. Together, male and female were meant to be co-regents under God, lovingly ruling over a joyful creation. And then finally, in verse 28, God blessed them. So you have this magnificent creation and beautiful beings made in the image of God that are given rule and dominion over the earth to steward it and to enjoy unbroken fellowship with God. No priesthood, no animals, no sacrifices, just walking with God every day. This is the way we were supposed to be. And then one more thing, Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. God saw all that He made, and behold, it was how good? Very good. Very good. Very good. So it wasn't just good, it was very good. And who's saying that it's good? God is saying that it's good. God is saying that what He laid out here is very good. Amen. So God made the earth and all its creatures and His crowning creation man, and He blessed it, and He called it very good. In other words, creation was perfect. Yes. Creation, like its creator, was perfect. The state of things at that time could be described by the Hebrew word shalom. Shalom was a deep word, and I think I got some slides. Shalom was the state of wellness, wholeness, beauty, and peace. See in Genesis 1:31, everything man needed, including significance and intimacy, was included in this state of shalom. A book that I don't necessarily recommend because Milton was a little bit of a heretic, but Milton wrote a book called Paradise Lost. It's a long book, and it all rhymes, kind of. It's like an epic poem, and it's rather difficult to read. But the value of reading Paradise Lost is that it imagines what it was like before the world fell. It's dynamite. It's dynamite just to kind of have a sanctified imagination about what things were like when God walked with man and there was no pain, no sin, no want, no need. Everything was provided for us in perfection. So if you want to read a long book, they have it in modern English, by the way. You could read Paradise Lost. It imagines the time. Susan Perlman says this. She works for Jews for Jesus. And she says the ancient Hebrew concept of peace Rooted in the word shalom, then wholeness and completeness and soundness and health, safety, prosperity, carrying with it the implication of permanence. Check out the NIV Study Bible. Has really some good things to say about shalom. It says shalom is one of the key words and images for salvation in the Bible. The Hebrew word refers most commonly to a person being uninjured and safe, whole and sound. In the New Testament, shalom is revealed as the reconciliation of all things to God through the work of Christ. It says in Colossians, God was pleased through Christ to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace. Shalom, through Christ's blood shed on the cross. So shalom experience then is multidimensional, complete well-being, physical, psychological, social, and spiritual. It flows from all of one's relationships being put right with God, within oneself, and with others. Now, doesn't that sound good? How many of you have experienced strife with somebody else in the last 48 hours? Anybody out there? I have 4 kids, so that's right. Every breakfast. Imagine all of your relationships being right. Imagine all of your relationships being right. How we long? Do we not long for that? Do you not long for peace, that kind of peace? So God made this world that reflected him. God made a world that reflected him. All things were right. All things were at peace. All things were whole. And as we mentioned, as we'll see as we kind of walk through the arc of redemption, as we walk through those 4 images over the next few weeks, mankind also had the ability to choose. Because we're made in the image of God, we had a will, and we had the ability to choose. So, I mean, some theologians say that God was taking a risk. I don't know if risk is the right word, but God created creatures, beings that could choose to obey him or not. I thought about, what Vanessa said. When Jesus said the demons had to go, they had to go. When he tells us to go, we go watch TV. When Jesus told the wind and the waves, be still, they had to obey. And he tells you to be still, and you keep on worrying. Isn't it crazy that he gave us the ability to choose? You might want to use your will a little better. Me and you. I don't know. So he gave us the ability to choose, which is not the same thing as free will. I want you guys to take the idea of free will and throw it out. Okay, free will means I can choose 360 degrees. I can choose God, I can choose right or wrong. Because we are corrupted beings, our 360 got limited. So we're not able to choose God without help. So our will is truly free. We are bent towards ourselves. We are self-worshiping, self-enthroning. And so we're not truly free in that sense, but our choices are actual choices. So I don't know if that confuses you or clears things up for you, but our choices are real. We have the ability to make actual choices, even though we don't have the ability to choose that Adam and Eve had. Millard Erickson, a theologian who wrote a great systematic theology called, cleverly, Christian theology, says this: each part of creation is capable of fulfilling God's purposes for it, but each obeys in a different way. The inanimate creation does so mechanically, obeying natural laws that govern the physical world. The animate creation, life, does so instinctively, responding to impulses within. Only humans are capable of obeying God consciously and willingly, and thus glorifying God most fully. God made us for it. So the ability to choose puts a tremendous responsibility on man. It put a tremendous responsibility on Adam and Eve. Man alone was given co-regency over the earth. And only men and angels had the ability to choose to obey or not. And of course, that ability to choose has tremendous implications as well. So I'm going to give you guys a spoiler alert. I'm going to kind of horn in on Jeremy's message for next week. You may or may not know this, but mankind fell. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. The story doesn't go well, okay? So we're going to see next week that mankind, our ancestors, chose to dethrone God and enthrone themselves. So you realize, don't you, that creation didn't fall because somebody ate a piece of fruit. It wasn't an apple. I don't know where we got that. Maybe it's a mango. I don't know. But creation didn't fall because of a piece of fruit. Creation fell because of a rebellion. Okay? Eve could not have taken that fruit had she first not rebelled. Right? So man chose to dethrone God and declare himself king, and guess what? We still do that. Every time you say no, Lord, you dethrone God and declare yourself king. And that is the core of all sin. Remains the problem today. So our problem is not so much the individual sins we commit, although they are certainly a problem. They're actually a symptom of the problem, and the problem is that we are born rebels. We are rebels. And so creation is in its state because of us. Not just because of our ancestors, but because of me and you. But I quoted Colossians up there, Colossians 1:19 through 20. God was pleased through Christ to reconcile himself to all things, whether things on earth, things in heaven, by making peace shed through the blood of Christ on the cross. So that passage gives us hope. Remember the video? Remember the video where in the end, God reverses things and the rose comes back to life and the sin leaves the cup and the plates are all restored? Remember that video? Shalom can be restored through Messiah. Shalom, like I say, I'm giving you a preview next week. Shalom can be restored through the Messiah. God restores the image of God in us, Christ Jesus. Ladies and gentlemen, God is at work in history. The Messiah came. We're going to get to that part of the ark of redemption, where there's redemption, where Jesus came, like it showed in the video, to pay for our sins. And we know we're sinners. If we're honest, we know we are. So if you're sitting here today, outside of Christ, outside of this great story of redemption, you can get on the story today. You can call on Jesus. The death that is working in you can be reversed. You can be restored and you can be forgiven. God is at work in history. He is taking history to his glorious desired end. God started creation, awesome, and he's going to go somewhere good. So I want to urge us to revel in the magnificence and the wisdom and the handiwork of God. Let's pray. Lord, our need is desperate. Our vision is so narrow. We're thinking about lunch. We're thinking about how I'm going to pay that bill. We're thinking about how I'm not going to be single anymore. We're thinking about how I'm not going to be married anymore. We're thinking about that problem at work. We're thinking about that chore that has to be done, that bill that has to be paid. We're thinking about some responsibility. Oh yeah, and maybe some ministry too. And Lord, you have us in this grand, unfolding, magnificent panorama of history of what you're doing in the world. And you've given thousands of years after the Messiah came for mankind to repent. And Lord, there's somebody in this room that needs to repent today and trust in Jesus. Father, I would beg you to open up our eyes to the great thing that you are doing, that you have been doing, and you've been weaving throughout history, and you will continue to do, and it will never end. When you restore creation, we won't be floating on clouds forever. The revelry in your presence, the exploration, the learning, the loving, the fellowship will never end. How great you are, oh God. Oh, that we could touch the hem of the garment. Oh, that we could catch a glimpse of what you are doing in creation. Oh, Lord. You showed us little pieces and signs. You've given us the scriptures. We know. You give us hints into what you're thinking and what you're doing. Let us bow to you today. Believer and unbeliever, let us bow to you today and get with the program. Jump into the plan of redemption, to put away our little petty things and follow you with all of our hearts. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Please stand.